My name's Ava. I'm 26 years old, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably say something like, she's quiet, she doesn't speak up, she fades into the background. They'd tell you I'm shy, maybe even fragile, the kind of girl who avoids confrontation, the kind of woman who doesn't have much of a personality. But here's the truth, silence doesn't mean absence. Growing up in my house, silence was survival. My brother, Ethan, was the golden child, older by 3 years, loud, charismatic, and constantly the center of attention. My parents adored him. He was destined for greatness, the boy who spoke his mind, who stood tall, who made friends easily. Me? I was the shadow, the one who kept to herself, the one teachers praised for being polite while classmates overlooked me. And at home, that invisibility only got worse. If Ethan told a joke at the dinner table, everyone laughed. If I tried to add something, the conversation rolled right over me. If Ethan bragged about his grades or his football games, he was showered with praise. When I quietly aced an exam, good job, honey, followed by moving on to whatever Ethan had done that week. It wasn't just neglect, it was dismissal. My words didn't matter, my opinions didn't count, and after years of trying to speak and being talked over, I stopped trying. I learned to swallow my thoughts before they could reach my lips. I learned to nod instead of disagree. I learned that if I stayed quiet, I wouldn't be ridiculed, and maybe, just maybe, I'd be left alone. But invisibility breeds two things, pain and freedom. While Ethan soaked up the spotlight, I lived in the shadows, and in those shadows, I found a world that wasn't about noise and ego, but about precision, patience, and control. At 14, I joined a local martial arts class. My parents thought it was a phase, a hobby to get me out of the house. What they didn't realize was that every kick, every stance, every moment of discipline rewired me. I wasn't just learning how to fight, I was learning how to endure. At 16, while Ethan threw parties and bragged about girls, I was sneaking into the library, devouring books on history, psychology, strategy. I learned how wars were fought, how leaders thought, how ordinary people became extraordinary under pressure. And by 18, I'd already caught the eye of people my family had never even dreamed I'd meet. But I'll get to that later. For now, all you need to understand is this: to my family, I was invisible. To the world beyond them, I was becoming something else entirely. And the more they dismissed me, the more they built the weapon that would one day shatter their illusions. The night that memory always drags me back to was a family dinner 2 years before everything exploded. We were all crowded around the long wooden table in my parents' dining room, candles flickering, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread filling the air. Ethan was at his usual spot, halfway through a story about his latest promotion at work, exaggerating every detail to squeeze out laughs from my aunts and uncles. And the boss said, "Ethan, you're the only one I can trust with this project." He puffed up his chest, mimicking the man's deep voice. Everyone chuckled, glasses clinking, my mother glowing with pride. I tried to interject, just once. "That's funny," I said quietly, "because last week my Ava, Mom cut in without even looking at me. She waved her hand like I was background noise. Ethan's talking." The words stung, sharp and familiar. My chest tightened, heat rising in my face. Across the table, Ethan smirked, his eyes locking onto mine with that cruel, mocking glint. "See?" he said loudly, tilting his head toward me. "This is why Ava doesn't talk much. Nothing interesting to say." The table erupted in laughter. My uncle nearly spit out his wine. My mother chuckled, covering her mouth like she didn't want to be rude, but she still laughed. And me? I froze. I clenched my fork so tight the metal dug into my palm. I wanted to scream, to throw my plate, to shout that I was more than they'd ever allowed me to be. But I didn't. I swallowed the fire, like I always did. I smiled weakly, dropped my gaze, and let them move on. That night, though, something shifted. Because while my family thought they'd silenced me again, I'd already learned how to channel silence into fuel. I went home, locked my door, and trained until my knuckles bled. Push-ups, drills, shadowboxing. My body screamed, but I didn't stop. Every cruel word, every laugh, Every dismissal became weight I lifted, sweat I poured, fire I forged. And still, no one knew. Not my parents, not Ethan, not the cousins who loved to mock me. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. They had no idea silence can be strategy. And maybe that's why, when the generals finally came for me, the shock on their faces was so complete. Because they never realized the girl they were laughing at had already been building a life beyond their comprehension. The first real crack between my two lives appeared on a rainy Thursday night. I was 19, a freshman at a local university, balancing classes and the secret training I'd been quietly recruited into. Officially, I was just another student. Unofficially, I was undergoing evaluations, strategy drills, and physical tests with people who didn't see me as invisible, they saw me as potential. That night, after hours of close-quarters combat training, I came home drenched and exhausted. My knuckles were raw, my muscles aching. I slipped in through the back door, hoping to avoid the living room, but fate rarely plays nice. The whole family was there. Ethan sprawled across the couch, Mom folding laundry, Dad half asleep with the TV humming in the background. "Where've you been?" Ethan asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "Library," I muttered, kicking off my shoes before they noticed how muddy they were. He snorted. "Sure, because nothing screams library like looking like you got hit by a truck." Mom looked up from her laundry, frowning. "Honestly, Ava, you're always running off somewhere. Can't you just be normal? Spend time with the family?" My jaw clenched. Normal. That word felt like a cage. "I was studying," I repeated, my voice sharper this time. Ethan smirked, leaning forward. "Studying what? How to lose a fight?" He mimed throwing a punch, making my younger cousins laugh. Something inside me cracked. For the first time, I didn't swallow the insult. Instead, I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You'd be surprised what I know how to do." The room stilled. Ethan raised his eyebrows, grinning like he'd just found new prey. "Oh, look who's growing a backbone." Mom sighed, exasperated. "Don't start fights, Ava. You'll never win against your brother." That sentence, "you'll never win," burned into me like a brand. I wanted to scream that they didn't know me at all, that while they were laughing, I was out there learning to break chokeholds, disarm knives, and dismantle opponents twice my size. That quiet didn't mean weak. But I couldn't, not yet. So instead, I bit my tongue, carried my aching body upstairs, and promised myself that the day would come when their words wouldn't cut anymore. And that was the first time I realized my silence wasn't just survival. It was strategy. The conflict only deepened as months passed. Balancing my family's perception of me with my secret life became suffocating. By day, I was the quiet, forgettable daughter. By night, I was Nightingale, a name given to me during training, symbolizing my ability to strike silently and vanish just as quickly. The irony? My family couldn't stop mocking my silence, while the people who mattered most valued it as my greatest strength. But my two worlds clashed harder one evening when Ethan barged into my room uninvited. I'd just come back from a field exercise, my bag half open on the bed. Inside were tactical gloves, notebooks filled with coded notes, and a small badge I wasn't supposed to show anyone. I'd barely set it down when Ethan shoved the door open. "Why's your light still on? It's past midnight," he said, flopping onto my chair like he owned the place. I stiffened, trying to slide my bag closed without drawing attention. "Homework." He rolled his eyes. "God, you're boring. No wonder nobody wants to hang out with you. You don't do anything." The words stabbed, same as always, but this time, fear laced the pain. If he saw what was in that bag, everything would unravel. I forced a calm smile. Maybe I just don't feel the need to brag about what I'm doing every second. His head snapped up, surprise flickering across his face. That wasn't my usual submissive tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "Nothing," I said quickly, pulling the bag toward me. My pulse thundered in my ears. He squinted, suspicion sharpening. "You're hiding something." Panic surged. For a moment, I imagined him ripping open the bag, finding the badge, running downstairs to tell Mom and Dad. So I did the one thing I'd never done before. I stood my ground. "Get out of my room, Ethan." The words came out low and firm, stronger than I intended. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, gripping the bag tightly. "Get out." For once, he didn't have a snappy comeback. He stared at me, unsettled, like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and left, slamming the door behind him. I exhaled shakily, my whole body trembling. That night, sitting on the edge of my bed, I realized how fragile the balance was. My family wanted me small, silent, predictable. My other life wanted me sharp, strong, unyielding. And sooner or later, those two versions of me were going to collide. Hard. By the time I was 21, Nightingale wasn't just a code name, it was who I was becoming. My days were a blur of classes and family obligations, but my nights belonged to something else, an organization that thrived on discipline, strategy, and silence. We weren't superheroes, and we weren't soldiers exactly. We were specialists, trained to observe, infiltrate, gather intelligence, and when necessary, fight with precision. And I was good at it. The same silence my family despised became my sharpest tool. I could move undetected, notice details others missed, and wait patiently for the perfect moment to act. My instructors praised me. "You don't need to be the loudest in the room," one said during a nighttime exercise. "You just need to be the one everyone underestimates. That's your power." But while my secret world grew richer, my family life grew darker. Ethan had just landed a big promotion at his company, and our parents celebrated like he'd won a Nobel Prize. The whole family gathered, champagne glasses clinking, laughter bouncing off the dining room walls, and then, inevitably, the attention turned to me. "So, Ava," my aunt asked casually, "what are you doing with yourself these days?" Before I could answer, Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "What she always does, nothing. You know Ava. Always reading, always hiding. She probably talks more to her books than actual people." Laughter rippled around the table. I felt my stomach tighten. I tried to speak, to at least defend myself, but Mom cut in smoothly. "She's just quiet. Bless her heart. Not everyone needs to shine like Ethan." That word again, shine, like there was only one kind of light, and I didn't have it. I gripped my glass of water so tight I thought it might shatter. They had no idea where I'd been last week, what I'd done. They didn't know I'd been blindfolded and dropped in the woods with nothing but a compass and told to make it back to base. They didn't know I'd spent 3 hours underwater learning how to hold my breath and fight panic. They didn't know that while they laughed, generals were memorizing my file, marking my progress, calling me by a name they couldn't even imagine. But sitting at that table, listening to the laughter, I felt like I was drowning, not because I was weak, but because I couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet, maybe not ever. So I smiled politely, the same empty smile I'd been practicing since I was a child, and excused myself early. Later that night, lying in bed, I made myself a promise. One day, they were going to see me, not the Ava they thought they knew, the invisible, forgettable shadow. No, they were going to see Nightingale. And when that day came, they'd never laugh again. The clash came sooner than I expected. It was the night of my cousin's wedding. The whole family was dressed up, the ballroom glittering with chandeliers and soft music. I wore a dark blue dress, simple but elegant. Ethan, of course, arrived in a tailored suit, immediately stealing the spotlight, surrounded by friends and relatives who adored him. As the night went on, I stuck to the edges, sipping water, watching the dance floor. That's when Ethan spotted me and sauntered over with that smirk I hated. "Look at you," he said, eyes sweeping me up and down, still hiding in the corners. "Do you ever actually live, Ava? Or are you just a ghost at these things?" I clenched my jaw. "I'm fine where I am." He laughed loudly, drawing attention. "See? This is what I mean. Ava's always so boring. She doesn't talk, doesn't dance, doesn't do anything. Honestly, sometimes I forget she's even part of the family." A few cousins laughed. My cheeks burned, but my voice stayed steady. "Maybe I don't feel the need to perform for people." That shut him up for half a second, but then he leaned in closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You think you're mysterious, he hissed, but you're just pathetic. Nobody notices you because you're nothing worth noticing. The words cut deep, sharper than I wanted them to. For a split second, I almost let them break me. But then I remembered my instructor's words. Silence isn't weakness, it's power. So I smiled, a small, controlled smile that unnerved him more than if I'd screamed. Careful, Ethan, I whispered. Ghosts have a way of haunting people. His expression faltered. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He walked away, muttering something I couldn't hear. I stood there, my heart pounding, my blood roaring in my ears. Part of me wanted to chase him down, to reveal everything, to show him exactly how wrong he was, but I didn't. Not yet. Because I knew the time was coming. Already, my phone buzzed with coded messages. Already, whispers of bigger assignments were circling. Already, the line between Ava, the invisible sister, and Nightingale, the operative, was thinning. And soon, very soon, the two worlds were going to collide in a way none of us could escape. It happened at my father's birthday dinner. The house was packed, relatives, neighbors, even a few of Dad's colleagues. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and spices, laughter echoing off the walls. Ethan was at the head of the conversation, as usual, regaling everyone with some exaggerated story about how he saved a project at work. People clapped and cheered like he'd invented fire. And then, as always, the spotlight turned toward me. So, Ava, Dad's colleague asked, adjusting his tie, what's your field again? What are you doing these days? I opened my mouth, but Ethan was faster. He leaned back, grinning. Oh, Ava? She's doing her usual absolutely nothing. Reading, daydreaming, pretending she's mysterious. It's kind of her thing. The table erupted in laughter. Even Mom chuckled softly, shaking her head. I froze. The humiliation was sharp, like knives digging into my skin. My face felt hot, but my hands were cold. I stared down at my plate, my appetite gone. That's not true, I said quietly. Ethan snorted. What? You gonna tell us you're secretly a spy? A superhero? Come on, Ava. Stop embarrassing yourself. Something inside me snapped. I slammed my fork down, the metal clattering against the plate. Everyone fell silent, staring. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. You don't know anything about me, Ethan. None of you do. The air in the room shifted. A few cousins whispered. My father frowned. My mother's face tightened. Ethan, of course, leaned in with mock pity. Oh, poor Ava. Always so dramatic. Look at her. Everyone, our quiet little sister, thinks she's important. He laughed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I looked him dead in the eye and whispered, you'll regret underestimating me. The table went cold. But then, before anyone could speak, there was a knock at the door. Not a polite knock, a firm, deliberate knock. Dad got up, confused, and walked to the entryway. When he opened the door, I saw them, two men in crisp uniforms, their presence commanding the space instantly. Their badges gleamed, their posture rigid. Evening, sir, one of them said. We're here for Nightingale. Every head in the dining room turned toward me. And in that instant, my life as Ava and my life as Nightingale collided. The silence was suffocating. My mother's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against her plate. My father blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. My cousins exchanged bewildered glances. Ethan just stared at me, his smirk frozen on his face. The taller general stepped forward, his voice steady. With your permission, sir, we need to speak to her immediately. Dad stammered. Wait. Who? Ava? The general's eyes flicked to me. Not Ava. Nightingale. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. My legs felt steady, though inside my chest, my heart was pounding like a drum. For the first time, I didn't hide. I didn't shrink. I stepped forward. Yes, sir, I said. My voice was clear, strong, mine. Gasps rippled around the table. My father's jaw dropped. My mother's face drained of color. Ethan. Ethan looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. The general saluted me, sharp and precise. "Ma'am, we've been ordered to request your presence. It's urgent." "Understood," I replied, returning the salute with equal precision. The room exploded with whispers. "Ma'am?" one cousin hissed. "What's going on?" another muttered. "Is this a joke?" But it wasn't a joke. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his voice cracking. "Wait, hold on. You've got the wrong person. She's nothing. She's just..." "Enough," the shorter general cut in, his tone sharp as a blade. "You will show her respect. She's earned it." The entire room froze. I looked at Ethan. For years he'd laughed at me, mocked me, called me invisible. Now he stood there trembling, his mouth open but no words coming out. It should have felt like victory, and in a way, it did, but there was also something heavier, something final. I turned back to my family, their eyes burned into me, confusion, shock, betrayal, awe. "I wanted to tell you," I said softly, "but I couldn't, not until now." Nobody spoke. The general gestured toward the door. "Nightingale, it's time." I nodded, walking past the table. My heels clicked against the floor, each step echoing in the silence. As I passed Ethan, I paused just long enough to whisper, "You were wrong. I was never invisible." His face crumbled. And then I walked out the door, into the night, with the generals at my side. The ride in the military vehicle was silent, but my mind was loud. The weight of what had just happened pressed against me like armor I hadn't taken off. For years, I'd sat at that family table, biting my tongue while Ethan mocked me, while my parents let him, while cousins chimed in. My silence had been mistaken for weakness, when in reality it was survival, and tonight, that silence had shattered. The generals briefed me quickly on the situation, something urgent at headquarters, but I only half heard. My thoughts were still with my family, replaying their stunned faces like a broken reel. When we arrived, I slipped into mission mode. Commands, strategy, decisions. This was the world where my voice mattered. Soldiers listened, teams executed, outcomes depended on me, and I was good at it. Better than good. Nightingale was a name earned, not given. Hours later, when the dust of the mission settled and the adrenaline ebbed, exhaustion hit me. The generals congratulated me. "As always, flawless," one said with a rare smile. But my chest ached, not from the mission, from home. I returned just before dawn. The house was quiet, but lights were still on. My family hadn't slept. When I walked in, their heads turned. The room was heavy, thick with questions. Mom was the first to speak. Her voice trembled. "Ava, what was that? Who are you?" I stood in the doorway, still in my uniform. "I'm me, the same me I've always been. You just never wanted to see her." Dad rubbed his temples. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Every time I spoke, you laughed. Every time I tried, you dismissed me. You didn't want the truth. You wanted the quiet Ava who stayed small so Ethan could shine." Ethan flinched like I'd struck him. For once, he had no clever retort. "I wasn't allowed to tell you," I continued, softer now, "but even if I could have, I didn't trust you to listen." Silence stretched between us, heavy, uncomfortable, necessary. Finally, Ethan spoke. His voice was low, ragged. I didn't know. I thought," he broke off, shaking his head. "No," I cut in. "You didn't think. You assumed. You mocked. And you made me feel worthless for years." He looked down. For the first time in his life, my brother seemed small. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I didn't need your approval to be who I am, but it would have meant something if I had your respect." Tears stung at the corners of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I stood tall, uniform crisp, heart pounding. For the first time, my family wasn't laughing. They were listening. The days after were strange. My family walked around the house like it was filled with ghosts of the assumptions they'd made, the lies they'd told themselves about me, the laughter that now tasted bitter in their mouths. Mom tried to bridge the gap first. She knocked on my door one evening, carrying a mug of tea. She set it down gently on my desk. "I don't know how to fix this, she admitted, her voice breaking, "but I want to try." It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was a start. Dad avoided me at first, retreating into silence the way I used to. Eventually, he looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." His tone was heavy, guilt woven into every word. Ethan, he struggled the most. He tried jokes, half-hearted, awkward, they fell flat. Finally, one night, he stopped me in the hallway. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry, Ava, for all of it. I didn't know who you were. I didn't want to know. That's on me." I wanted to forgive him right there, but forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a process. So I nodded. "I don't need you to be sorry, I need you to change." He nodded back, quiet. For once, he really heard me. Life didn't transform overnight. They didn't suddenly treat me like some hero every second of the day, but they stopped laughing at me. They stopped silencing me, and slowly, they started asking questions, listening, trying. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And me? I learned the most important lesson of all. That my worth was never theirs to define. I had spent years waiting for validation from people who couldn't see past their own egos. I thought their laughter defined me, their silence condemned me, but in truth, their blindness only hid my strength from them, it never took it away. The night the generals called me by my codename was the night my family finally saw me, but I had seen myself long before. And that's what I want anyone reading this to take away. Don't wait for the people who dismiss you to recognize your value. Don't beg for their respect or shrink for their comfort. Stand tall, speak your truth, live it, even if no one believes you. Because one day, the world won't just hear your name. It will stand at attention when it's spoken.